To kick this off, the first thing that we really want to talk about, specifically that I want to talk about, is going to be the sound of the drums. Okay, what I'm going for with the band Periphery. For those of you that don't know, Periphery is a fairly progressive metal band that's really known for very aggressive tones when it comes to the guitars, the drums, everything. Very in your face, not so much, kind of quiet and easy on the ears always. And I think because of that aggressive nature, it inspires a certain kind of sound that I always go for when we're recording drums or even when I'm playing live. And I think this started for me when I was really young. Whenever I would listen to a record of any kind, I'd put on CDs in my basement, I'd play along the covers and jam, I would always pay attention to the sound of the drums. And that sound, for whatever reason, I would always visualize what that drummer looked like playing. So if the snare drum sounded really big and boomy, I would envision that drummer hitting like boom every time. So that's how I would actually hit the drums based on what it sounded like. If it sounded really small and dinky, I would hit kind of lighter and a little bit less aggressively. But with Periphery, as I said, it's very aggressive in nature. So on one side of the fence, I'm really just kind of gravitating towards playing very, very loud, very, very powerful, or in a very, very powerful way with Periphery, trying to get drum tones live that represent what we really kind of would program as a demo, which is what we can talk about that specific process a little bit later. Yeah. But along with that, it also comes down to kind of, why you want to go for that sound. And I think that just depends on what music you're playing, or I think whatever session you're working on. Just because the music sounds a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that there's one specific drum size or one specific setup that can work for that. And that's the other side of this, is as much as you want to play kind of physically and passionately based on the music, you also want to figure out what is the right setup for you. And for those of you that know Periphery, you may know that I've kind of changed my setup often and have changed my setup very often throughout the time that I've been in the band. And I think in the beginning, we were really kind of just going headstrong, not as focused on the sound. And I think at that time, maybe you as a producer were really just starting to dabble in recording drums, recording everything. I know that you were demoing your own stuff.
Yeah, no, I'd say I've really been focused on recording drums probably for only about 2 or 3 years now. And a lot of it's been in conjunction with you, both in the studio and also live. We work together engineering your drum sounds for live, and we often record stems from our live shows and analyze that. And we have a system down, but I want to hasten to add, it's actually a system that is going to translate very well to pretty much any style of music. One of the really good things about drums is that the core instrument doesn't actually change that much between different styles. Sure, you can have different size drums, different types of head, but so much of it comes down to the source, how you play them. So when we look at things like drum tuning, it's going to be really transferable to other styles, but we're going to need to really look at certain things like the durability aspect. With you playing as hard as you do, there are a lot of challenges involved in preserving a good drum sound, or even attaining a good drum sound if the heads simply aren't the correct selection or aren't tuned the right way. So it's going to be a really in-depth process looking at that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a good place to jump into kind of the evolution of my drum set and also the way that I'm playing. So when we did start off, I was tuning the drums myself, and because I was going for that really, really aggressive sound, I really went for a very punchy, really heavy attack-based kind of drum tuning. And to get that, I just would put on the heads and go finger tight as far as setting the head tension. Yep. And that sound can be really really cool if you're in a live setting, I think.
Yeah, or just in person, if you're hitting that, you're going to hear a ton of attack. It's going to sound almost like a kick drum.
Sure.
In fact, I think you used to do that and kind of substitute kick drums with the toms.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't necessarily have that full kind of tone that you want. It doesn't really have any tone to it, to be honest. It's complete attack, and it's just kind of thuddy.
Yeah, and when you take away the volume aspect, when you put a microphone on that and you listen back to it in the studio aspect, much quieter. It's a bit like when you record a really loud guitar amp. It sounds completely different once you actually take it down to a listenable volume. And in that situation, actually, you just get like a papery kind of attack. So one of the things that we've gravitated towards is really learning how to get drum tones that really come across in a studio setting and on a recording setting to sound really big and full, and still have the kind of attack that we're after. But we'll get into tuning in a second, but we'll talk about all of that.
For sure. Yeah, and I think too, it really just took a couple years of Alex Marquides, our head sound engineer, and you and the other guys being like, yeah, we get it. You like to hit hard, but it doesn't sound that good. Like Alex would say, I hate your floor tom. I hate, like he would really get on me about it. Right. And when you started really touring with us, there was I was a little bit nervous about letting you tune my drums. It would like annoy me sometimes. It's like, no, this is my sound. I know that they're getting in your ear about it. And I would see Nolly, like, I'd come in the venue and we'd be set up for sound check and he'd be on my drums, like, tweaking things. And it's like, dude, what are you doing, You would ask.
Yeah,
fair enough. But I took a little bit for me to really say, all right, you're right. It is about the music. And I think when we started really preparing for Juggernaut, that's when I decided that, one, it would be better to have more drums because then I can have more options. Previously, this was not my setup. I was playing with really a minimal setup. One floor tom, kick drum, snare drum, sometimes two floor toms. But I really wanted more options. I wanted more melody to the drums. And with that in mind, you really couldn't get much melody having the drums finger tight and tuned really thuddy. You'd get the basic low end of the drums, but it just, again, under the microscope, really didn't translate. So at that point, I had known that Nolly had been spending a really long time doing his homework, working on learning how to tune the drums, learning how to pick different mics to get the best sound out of the drums in different kind of settings and so forth. So he kind of won over my trust, and I let him sit down and start tuning my drums, and now I don't know what to do without him, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Well, I can't actually play drums, just so that everybody knows that as well. I can just kind of tune them, and that's where my enjoyment is. Yeah. Since I can't really.
So it's not like I'm putting you to work.
Not really, but and you know what? Doing it is also, I don't know. I'd like to practice things all the time. That's kind of in my nature, and doing it every day develops a core skill set, and something that, I mean, as we said right at the beginning, like there are so many skills that you can learn without being in this situation under pressure. And I'm not a drummer, but I own a drum kit and I own a few microphones. And for the last couple of years, and still to this day, I'll be constantly messing around with tuning ideas, really trying to get my ear in on some new techniques, learning about microphone placement just in my little studio room, which it's not a drum room. It actually sounds pretty terrible for drums. It's really dead sounding. But I've learned so much through doing that when we come into a situation like this, we can be really quick and methodical.